My parents retained a lawyer to label me legally unfit after I declined to turn over my salary, but when the truth came out, sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most become your greatest threat. And what do you do when your own family, the people who are supposed to protect you, try to declare you mentally incompetent just to take everything you've ever worked for? What then? It was Tuesday night, just past 11 p.m., when my entire world got turned upside down. My family didn't knock. They didn't ring the doorbell. They just let themselves into my Chicago penthouse, using the emergency keys I had foolishly entrusted them with. My brother, Joshua, was already leaning against my pristine granite island, smelling of stale bourbon and a heavy, suffocating fear. My parents, Karen and David, stood beside him. They weren't visitors, though. They were debt collectors. "We need $65,000, Lauren," my father stated, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "Joshua's margin call is due." I stood there, trying to process it. $65,000. Again. And when I said no, my mother didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just reached into her designer bag, pulled out a thick legal document, and dropped it onto my glass coffee table. It landed with a sickening thud. It was a petition for emergency guardianship. The reason listed? Mental instability. "We're doing this for your own good," she whispered, her eyes cold, so cold they looked like chips of ice. "We are taking control of your assets tomorrow morning." The door clicked shut behind them, and the silence that filled my penthouse was heavy, absolute. I didn't chase them. I didn't throw the vase of white lilies against the wall. I just walked to the door, my movements strangely precise, and engaged the deadbolt. Then, the secondary security lock I'd installed 3 months ago, right after Joshua first started asking about my bonus structure. I walked back to the kitchen island where my mother had left that vile petition. I didn't read it yet. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it was. It was a declaration of war, disguised as a legal pleading. I poured myself a glass of ice water. My hands were steady. The condensation on the glass was the only thing sweating in that room. I took a long, slow drink, feeling the cold slide down my throat, numbing the part of me that wanted to be a daughter, leaving only the part that was a senior architect. Architects don't panic when a load-bearing wall cracks. We evacuate. We shore up. We redesign. I carried my laptop to the dining table. Outside, the city lights of Chicago blinked, indifferent and beautiful. It was 11:15 p.m. The courts opened at 9 a.m. I had 9 hours and 45 minutes to turn my life into a fortress. First, the credit bureaus. Equifax, TransUnion, Experian. I initiated a total security freeze on all three. Click. Frozen. Click. Frozen. No one was opening a credit card, a loan, or a utility account in my name without a PIN that existed only in my head. Next, the banks. My parents knew my old passwords. They knew my social security number. They knew the name of my first pet and the street I grew up on. I logged into my primary checking account. Password? A random string of 30 characters. Security questions? Mother's maiden name. I changed the answer to the serial number of my laptop. Name of first elementary school? Changed it to the chemical formula for concrete. Then the liquidity. I couldn't leave my cash where a temporary court order could easily reach it. I opened a high-yield holding account I'd set up years ago for a potential firm buy-in, an account they didn't even know existed. I initiated a wire transfer for 90% of my liquid assets. The screen asked for confirmation. "Are you sure you want to transfer $112,000?" I hit enter. The progress bar loaded. Green. Complete. I didn't stop there. I logged into my company's payroll portal. Removed my direct deposit information. If they managed to freeze my main account tomorrow, my next paycheck, $8,200, would not land in a trap. It would sit safely in payroll until I directed it elsewhere. By 12:03 a.m., I had digitally vanished. I was a ghost in my own financial life. I sat back, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face. I looked at that guardianship petition again. They wanted to paint me as incompetent. They wanted to tell a judge I was manic, reckless, unable to manage my own affairs. I looked at the logs of my activity. Precise. Methodical. Ruthless. This wasn't mania. This was a hostile takeover defense. I wasn't their little girl anymore. I was a sovereign nation, and I had just closed my borders. The Chicago wind howled against the reinforced glass, a low, constant moan that usually soothed me. Tonight, it felt like an echo of the silence in the room. I opened a new spreadsheet. I labeled it Family Liabilities. My finger hovered over the keys. Then I started typing. Joshua's DUI, 2019, $12,000. Mom's Emergency Cruise, 2021, $8,000. Dad's Country Club Arrears to Avoid Expulsion, 2022, $15,000. The list grew, row after row of bailouts, loans, and investments that were never repaid. The total at the bottom of the screen blinked back at me. $214,000 over 7 years. Why did I pay it? Why did I keep writing checks while they called me cold, ungrateful, distant? It wasn't because I was generous. It wasn't because I loved them. Not really. It was because of the invisible chain. You know that story? They chain a baby elephant to a stake. The little elephant pulls and pulls, but it isn't strong enough to break the chain. Eventually, it stops trying. It learns that it's trapped. Years later, when that elephant is fully grown, powerful enough to rip the stake out of the ground with a single tug, it doesn't. It stays put because it still believes it's weak. That was me. My parents had trained me since I was 6 years old that my worth was transactional. Good grades earned dinner. Silence earned peace. Money earned a momentary pause in the criticism. I wasn't writing checks to help them. I was paying a ransom for my own existence. I was the grown elephant, terrified of a tiny wooden stake, believing that if I stopped paying, I would cease to matter. I looked at the petition on the table. Mental incompetence. And just like that, the chain snapped. I wasn't the baby elephant anymore. I was the architect who had just designed a 70-story skyscraper that could withstand a magnitude 8 earthquake. I looked at the spreadsheet one last time. I didn't feel guilt. I felt the cold, hard clarity of a structural engineer realizing the foundation is rotten. You don't repair a rotten foundation. You condemn the building. I closed the laptop. The sun was starting to rise over Lake Michigan, painting the water in shades of steel and blood. I picked up my phone. I had one call to make before the courts opened. Not to a doctor. Not to a therapist. I dialed Aunt Lisa. My phone started vibrating relentlessly at 7 a.m. A persistent, angry buzz against the sleek surface of my desk. I didn't answer. I watched the notifications stack up like bricks in a wall. Joshua. Karen. David. Then the extended family chimed in. Aunt Sarah wrote, "Honey, your mom says you're having a breakdown. Please call us." A cousin Mike wrote, "Dude, you okay? Josh said you threatened to hurt yourself." I scrolled through the messages, my expression flat. This was the offensive. They were painting the narrative before I could even step into the courtroom. They were weaponizing my silence, turning my competence into mania and my boundaries into paranoia. I opened a voicemail from my father, time-stamped at 2 a.m. His voice was thick, slurred slightly by what I assumed was scotch. "You think that money is yours, Lauren? Who paid for your piano lessons? Who drove you to math camp? That money is mine. It's a return on my investment. You don't steal from the people who made you." I saved the voicemail. I backed it up to 3 different cloud servers. I sat there, staring at the audio file, and for the first time, I truly understood the math. To most people, a child is a person. To a narcissist, a child is an asset class. They don't see autonomy. They see equity. My salary wasn't my earnings. It was their dividend. My refusal to pay wasn't a boundary. It was a breach of contract. They genuinely didn't believe they were stealing. They believed they were liquidating an asset they owned. The realization didn't hurt. It cauterized the wound. It burned away the last lingering hope that maybe, just maybe, they were worried about me. They weren't worried. They were just afraid their stock was crashing. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the only person in my family who had been excommunicated for bad investments. Aunt Lisa. I was wondering when you'd call, she said, her voice dry as parchment. They filed for guardianship, I said. I know, she replied. Your mother posted a prayer request on Facebook for your mental health crisis 20 minutes ago. Be at my office in an hour. Bring coffee. Black. Aunt Lisa's office wasn't a home. It was a weapons silo disguised as a forensic accounting firm, located on the 42nd floor of a steel spire in the Loop. It smelled of ozone, burnt coffee, and billable hours. I walked past the reception desk. The receptionist didn't ask for my name. She just buzzed me through the frosted glass doors. Lisa was waiting. She stood by the window, looking out at the same gray skyline I had stared at the night before. She didn't look like my father's sister. She looked like a predator who had eaten the rest of a litter. She wore a charcoal suit that cost more than my first car. She didn't hug me. She didn't offer a platitude. She just pointed to the leather chair opposite her desk. Let me see it, she said. I slid the guardianship petition across the mahogany desk. She put on her reading glasses and flipped through the pages. The silence in the room was absolute. I watched her eyes scan the legal lies. Manic, reckless, danger to self, she laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound, like a branch snapping in winter. Incompetence, she muttered. They're claiming the woman who manages $100 million construction budgets can't balance a checkbook. She tossed the file back onto the desk. They're desperate, Lauren. Narcissists don't go to court unless they've run out of other options. They hate records. They hate judges. They hate anything they can't charm or bully. They want the money, I said. Joshua owes $65,000. No, Lisa said, leaning forward. Her eyes were hard. If they just wanted $65,000, they would have guilt-tripped you for 6 months. They would have sold the boat. They would have borrowed against the house again. Filing for guardianship is a nuclear option. It invites scrutiny. It invites the state into their finances. She pressed a button on her intercom. Send in the team. 2 minutes later, 3 associates walked in, carrying laptops. They didn't look like accountants. They looked like hackers in Brooks Brothers suits. Lisa stood up. She walked to the whiteboard. We aren't just defending you against a competence claim, she announced. We are performing a hostile audit. If David and Karen want to tell a judge that they are the responsible parties and you are the liability, we're going to open their books. She turned to me. I need everything you have access to. Old tax returns from before you were 18, trust documents, the address of every property they've ever claimed to own. I gave her the access codes. I gave her the social security numbers I had memorized. I watched as her team began to pull the threads of my parents' financial tapestry. On the screens, numbers began to scroll. Credit scores, mortgage liens, credit card balances. Find me the anomaly, Lisa ordered. Find me the reason they are so terrified of losing control that they'd try to lock their own daughter away. The room hummed with the sound of cooling fans and typing. I sat there, drinking the black coffee someone had placed in front of me. It tasted bitter and clean. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the client, and I had just hired the shark. It took 6 hours to find the lie. The sun was crossing the sky, dipping behind the skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the conference table. The hum of the servers had become a white noise backdrop to my anxiety. I had paced the length of the room 40 times. I had drunk 3 more cups of black coffee. Then the typing stopped. One of the associates, a young man with tired eyes, printed a single document. He didn't say a word. He just walked over and handed it to Aunt Lisa. She read it. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked up at me. And for the first time, the predator's gaze softened into something that looked terrifyingly like pity. Lauren, she said. Sit down. I sat. The leather chair felt cold against my back. Who owns the house in Naperville? She asked. My parents, I said. They bought it in 1998. They bought it in 98, Lisa corrected. But they don't own it. Not anymore. She slid the paper across the desk. It was a property tax history report. Look at the transfer date. 10 years ago, May 12th. I looked at the date. It was the day my grandmother Eleanor died. The deed was transferred, Lisa said, her voice steady and quiet. From David and Karen to the Eleanor Trust. I don't understand, I said. Dad told me Grandma died, without a will. He said everything went to probate to pay off her medical debts. He lied. Lisa said. There was a will and there was a trust. I just pulled the filing from the county clerk's archives. Your father didn't probate the estate. He suppressed the will and appointed himself the executive and trustee. She leaned forward. Lauren, the trust documents name a single beneficiary. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what she was going to say before she said it. It's you. The house, the remaining portfolio. It was all left to you. Your father was supposed to transfer the title to your name when you turned 25. He didn't. He buried the paperwork. He's been living in your house rent-free for 4 years past the legal deadline. The pieces slammed into place with the force of a wrecking ball. The panic in their eyes. The desperation. The guardianship petition. It wasn't about the $65,000 for Joshua's gambling debt. That was just the trigger. The real terror was that I was turning 30 next month. In many trusts, a 10-year audit is automatic. They knew the clock was ticking. They aren't trying to declare you incompetent because they think you're crazy, Lisa said, her voice hard as diamond. They're trying to declare you incompetent because if you are legally incapacitated, your father remains the trustee indefinitely. He keeps the house. He keeps the secret. He keeps the control. I stood up. I walked to the window. I looked out at the city I had built, the life I had constructed from scratch while believing I was nothing but a burden to them. All those years, I thought I was paying rent on my existence. In reality, they were the squatters. I turned back to Lisa. The sadness was gone. The confusion was gone. All that was left was the cold, blue flame of absolute tactical precision. They're living in my house, I said. Yes, Lisa replied. And they're trying to put me in a cage to keep it. Yes. Then let's go to court, I said, and let's burn it down. The hearing took place in courtroom 402 of the Daily Center. It was a windowless box of beige acoustical tile and fluorescent judgment that smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. My parents sat on the left. They had dressed for the role of the heartbroken saviors. My mother wore a soft blue cardigan, a costume designed to evoke sympathy, and dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. Joshua sat beside her, looking bored, checking his watch as if he had a tea time to catch once they had legally seized my existence. Their lawyer, a man named Sterling, who wore a suit that cost more than my first year of college tuition, began his opening statement. He painted a picture of a tragic decline. He used words like unhinged, manic spending, and paranoid delusions. He told the judge that my sudden freezing of assets was proof of a break from reality, a cry for help from a woman who had lost her grip. I sat with my hands folded on the table, my spine pressed against the hard wood of the chair. I didn't flinch. I watched them perform. It was a play, and they were terrible actors, but the script was dangerous. Aunt Lisa leaned in close to me. Her voice was a low, steel whisper that cut through the drone of the opposing counsel. Look at them, Lauren, she said. Really look at them. If we hadn't found that box in the basement, if we had walked in here today empty-handed, you would be in a medicated facility by Friday. They would have you on sedatives by the weekend to keep you compliant. Joshua would be driving your Porsche to the casino by Monday morning. They weren't just going to take your money. They were going to hollow you out and wear your life like a skin suit. The image hit me with the force of a physical blow. The alternate reality where they won wasn't just unfair.
It was a horror movie.
It was the total erasure of myself. That fear didn't make me tremble. It solidified me. It turned my blood into liquid nitrogen. Sterling finished his speech. He looked smug.
He thought he had won.
Miss Vance, the judge said, looking at Aunt Lisa, do you have a response regarding your client's mental state? Lisa stood up. She didn't pick up the medical records. She picked up the deed. Your Honor, she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room. We are not here to discuss my client's mental state. We are here to discuss the petitioner's criminal intent. We move to dismiss this petition on the grounds of unclean hands and fraud upon the court. The judge frowned. The petitioners claim they are concerned parents. In reality, Lisa continued, walking toward the bench, they are squatters who have been illegally occupying my client's property for 10 years. She placed the documents on the judge's bench. The silence in the courtroom was sudden and absolute. It was the sound of all the oxygen being sucked out of the room. Exhibit A, Lisa said, the last will and testament of Eleanor Vance, suppressed by the petitioner, David Vance. Exhibit B, the deed to the property at 1412 Oakwood Drive. The property is held in trust. The sole beneficiary is the respondent, Lauren Vance. The petitioners have been concealing this asset to live rent-free in a multi-million-dollar home that belongs to the woman they are trying to declare incompetent. I watched the judge read. I saw his eyebrows knit together. Then I saw his face harden. He looked up from the papers. He looked at my father. My parents' faces turned the color of old ash. The smugness vanished from Joshua's face, replaced by the slack-jawed realization of a man watching his meal ticket burn. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet. Are your clients aware that they are currently residing in the respondent's property without a lease while hiding her inheritance? Sterling stammered. He looked at my parents. He saw the guilt written in their panic. He closed his briefcase. Your Honor, Sterling said, I was not informed of this. Petition for guardianship is dismissed with prejudice. The judge banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the state's attorney's office for an immediate investigation into trust fraud and perjury. Get out of my courtroom. My mother started to wail. A real sound of terror this time. David slumped in his chair. Joshua looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. I didn't look back. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked out. The air in the hallway was cool and clean. The war was over. The occupation was ending. I didn't go out for champagne to celebrate. I drove straight to Naperville. The house loomed at the end of the cul-de-sac, a sprawling monument to their deception. It looked different to me now. It wasn't my childhood home. It was a crime scene. I walked up the driveway. I didn't ring the doorbell. I didn't need to. I owned the door. My father opened it before I could reach the handle. He looked 20 years older than he had that morning. He smelled of defeat and scotch. Lauren, he started, his voice cracking. We can explain. We were just trying to protect the asset for you. I didn't let him finish the lie. I handed him the manila envelope. This is your official notice to vacate, I said. My voice was calm, steady, and final. You have 30 days. The locks will be changed on November 1st at noon. If anything is missing, a light fixture, a painting, a single spoon, I will press charges for theft. The sheriff has a copy of the inventory list. My mother stood in the hallway, weeping into her hands. Joshua was behind her, holding a duffel bag, looking like a trapped animal. And you, I said, looking at my brother. You aren't a tenant. You don't have a lease. You are a guest who has overstayed his welcome by a decade. You don't get 30 days. You have 30 minutes. Where am I supposed to go? He whined, the entitlement still clinging to him like a bad cologne. I don't know, I said. Maybe you can bet on it. I turned around and walked back to my car. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as I drove away. I didn't feel sad. I felt the specific, weightless sensation of a structure that has finally been stripped of its dead weight. Back in my penthouse, the city was quiet. The wind off Lake Michigan had died down. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop one last time. I pulled up that spreadsheet. Family liabilities, $214,000. I looked at the number. For years, that number had been a chain. It had been the proof of my love and the metric of my exploitation. I highlighted the rows. I didn't try to collect it. I didn't send an invoice. I hit the delete key. The screen went blank. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a write-off. It was a bad debt cleared from the books so the company could finally become profitable. I closed the laptop. The silence in the room wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. I wasn't just a survivor. I was the architect. And for the first time in my life, the blueprint was entirely mine. Have you ever had to fight to reclaim your own life, your own identity from the people who are supposed to love you? Tell me your story in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear what you think.